Are you having a hard time figuring out what to get Dad for Father's Day? You should check out Row 1 Brand's Vintage Pictorum Gallery. They have America's best sports art. With over 7,200 historic sports prints, you're assured to find something unique for Dad this Father's Day. Instead of a boring old tie, get him a historic baseball photo taken by Henry High Sandom at the historic Polo Grounds Stadium in New York City during the 1894 Temple Cup. Or, if he's an NFL buff, check out the 1963 vintage NFL poster. These are so good looking that you'll be amazed how they turn out. Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1 and save 15% off your order.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. On January 18th, 1983, what many thought was a wrong in the Olympic world was made right. Legendary Jim Thorpe, yes, that Jim Thorpe, had his 1912 Olympic gold medals reinstated posthumously, 30 years after his passing. In this week's episode, we talk about a wrong that I believe needs to be made right. And in the end, it revolves around the same statue of, you guessed it, Jim Thorpe.
Welcome to the Football History Dude podcast, where each episode is a journey back in time to learn about the rich history of the NFL. Your host is Arnie Chapman. Football is his passion, and he wants you to come along with him to explore the yesteryear of the gridiron. So hop on board his DeLorean and let's get this baby up to 88 miles per hour.
Great Scott.
This time as we step off the DeLorean, the date is December 17th, 1983, and we are in the Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome parking lot. We're here to close out the 1983 season for the Cincinnati Bengals. But more importantly for this episode, this was the last game for Ken Riley, one of the baddest dudes to patrol the defensive backfield in the 1970s and early 80s. Ken Riley played cornerback for the Cincinnati Bengals for 15 years, amassing a whopping 65 total interceptions during this time. He is currently tied for 5th all time. I mean, that's pretty impressive, right? But this brings us to why we used the introduction in the episode. Something else that happened in 1983. You see, back in 1912, going even further back, Jim Thorpe dominated the Stockholm Olympics. And then King Gustav V declared to him, "Sir, you are the greatest athlete in the world." He won 2 gold medals. However, he had the medal stripped away not too long after his return to America because it was found out that he broke this amateur status from some playing minor league baseball for pay. Fast forward to 1983. The Olympic Committee officially reinstated Thorpe's medals, something that many thought to be long overdue. And we've talked about legendary Jim Thorpe on numerous occasions in this podcast. I mean, a statue of Jim Thorpe is in the hallowed halls of the Professional Football Hall of Fame. And this is where our story collides. The past meets the present. It is believed by many that Ken Riley belongs in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It almost seems like fate that the year that he retired was the same year the man with the statue in the hall had his medals reinstated, although it was 30 years after he passed. I hope this episode helps push the pendulum closer to getting Ken Riley in the Hall of Fame. Listen to his son in this episode to learn some more. And then I urge you to do some research on your own. And speaking of research, I left some good links on the website for you to start with. And by the way, you can get to the website through your podcast player or by heading straight to sportshistorynetwork.com. Also, I ask that you please help support this podcast by subscribing for free and leaving an honest review in the podcast app of choice. But for now, let's get into the story of Ken Riley. Just hit the website. I'm going to link out to whatever else kind of makes sense. Like, I've seen some really good Bengals posts, of course, and that kind of stuff. A lot of the thing I want to do here is just like what I've seen that you want to do. You want to continue to get his name out there and right or wrong as far as the Hall of Fame and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's really my main focus to keep his name out there. And eventually, I'm praying one day he actually gets in. So that's my that's been my main focus. Even when he was still here, that's what I really focus on. And eventually, I think he will get in there. But like I said, it's a lot of other deserving people. So I know that, things happen. It just takes time. So.
Yeah, it's a tough one because there are so many deserved people, like you said. I will tell you, I've had a few different Hall of Fame voters on my show, and recently the one that just came out, Rick Gosselin, that came out today. Your father's name was one of them that he brought up. Like I asked them, like, who's someone that you wish would be in the hall that you think deserves it, and they haven't made it yet. And I've heard the name multiple times before I knew who the man was, kind of thing.
Yeah. And in the last couple of years, it actually, maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, he started gaining some traction, and his name started coming up more and more. So yeah, it's just the process, and a lot of times, especially with the senior process, is kind of hush. You don't really know the criteria. You don't really know until like they just show the result. So it's a little bit different versus the guys that are going in outside of the senior committee.
Yeah, it's something that I knew nothing about until I started my podcast, and then I only know like this much compared to what is really going on. Going back though, let's take this back. So I want to kind of make this almost like a chronological order as well. One of the questions I had for you is, what's the earliest memory that you had of watching your father play when he was in the league?
Seemed like I always remembered, so I don't know what age I was. I know my grandmother used to tell stories that, well, we actually lived in Florida, so I didn't see all of his games. I would, of course, see Tampa Bay because we lived like 38 miles outside of Tampa. So we would always see the Bucks. So I would look for the highlights. But I have to say maybe 6 or 7. I always loved football, of course, and just keeping up with him and watching and waiting for, them to show the results of other games, or they'll show like a highlight, in between the Tampa game. I'm always looking to see if I can see him. So those are the things that really stand out in my mind.
It would have been cool if you would have had NFL ticket back then, so you could have watched all of his games.
That would have been so awesome. Definitely. I think about that now. I'm like, man, if I wish I had that when he was playing though, because like I said, I didn't get to see majority of his games.
And that's something that I really, even when I crafted that question in my head, it didn't even cross my mind that, oh yeah, that's like back in the day, they didn't have that opportunity to be able
Right.
to watch any game they wanted.
Yes, it was, like I said, you'd be looking. I remember Brent Musburger or somebody called Pat Summer, I'm just looking to see if I could just see a glimpse of 13 coming across the screen. So that's what I remember a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, so going back to his college days, was it Florida A&M? Is that where I saw?
Yep.
But he was a quarterback though, wasn't he? Not a cornerback?
Quarterback, never played defense in college at all. So strictly a quarterback. He likes to tell you that he was pampered as a quarterback. So he tells a story when he first got to Florida A&M, and they had him running the scout team, and they switched him over to defense. And the first play, they ran like a sweep or something, and he said he saw the lineman pulling, coming towards him, and he turned around and started running with the lineman. And so the coach was like, "That's it, get him out of here!" And like, he stayed. They kept him at quarterback. So
One of those things too that I wonder how much that played into effect when he moved into the defensive back role of being that used to being the general on the field and having the mind of where the ball is going to go. It had to have helped him.
I think so. I think he was a student of the game, and he was very smart. He was also a candidate Rhodes Scholar, so I think he was able to pick up things quickly. So I definitely think that helped him during that transition.
Kind of reminds me of so I had an episode on Sammy Baugh. This is a long time ago
Mm-hmm.
when I was actually doing solo episodes, and I saw one year Sammy Baugh had the hat trick. He had the most touchdown passes. Then on defense, he had the most interceptions, and then he also was like the punt leader for the year. It's like, just that he had that thing, and that's what he said. As a quarterback, I was on the defense. I knew where the guy was going with the ball,
Right.
kind of thing.
Exactly.
And then how did that transition happen? So he was quarterback, comes out of Florida A&M. What was the 6th round that I saw he got drafted?
6th round. he didn't have a choice. He said when he arrived at Cincinnati and Paul Brown said, "You're going to be a cornerback." So it wasn't like he was given an option to just try as a quarterback. That was the same year. Well, they had Greg Cook. So he said that he always just say that he felt that he was the second best quarterback, outside of Greg Cook, and he kind of said his game kind of mirrors today's Russell Wilson in Seattle.
Oh, okay.
So I knew he was a scrambler and he could throw in the run. So, but that's who he said his game as a quarterback was panning after like Russell Wilson.
So he's pretty had a good arm and everything. Like he actually was initially drafted to be a quarterback, or did automatically they thought he was going to be defensive back?
No, they automatically thought of defensive back. They just saw the athlete, and
Okay.
but they had no intentions of him playing quarterback.
I mean, when legendary Paul Brown says you're going to do something, he gives you opportunity. I guess it's kind of, you got to go with it.
Yeah, that was it. It was like, okay, you're playing defensive back, and that was it.
Yeah, I mean, it worked out, obviously. Had quite a few interceptions. I saw that he's tied for 5th all time with most of those names up there I knew even before I started a football history podcast. And that's one reason why I wanted to bring you on the show to talk about all the interceptions and all of these other things, yet how did they not relate into the Hall of Fame? I mean, let's go back to the interception. 65 of them. Just getting one, that's a tough challenge as is in the NFL. How hard is it for you think, to get an interception in the NFL?
Well, extremely hard. Even though I think they're throwing the ball a lot more. And at the time of his retirement, he was 4th all time. And then Rod Woodson passed him up, and I moved him down to 5th. But I mean, it's extremely hard. And actually, like one of the my arguments is that he's the number 2 corner because a lot of those guys ahead of him, Rod Wilson included, they actually switched to safety later on in their careers. But he, 15 years was on that corner. So he's the number 2 all-time interception leader if you look strictly as a cornerback. So I think that that is a heck of a number there. And I don't care they say longevity, and he played for a long time, but that says a lot too about, the work he put in to maintain his body and stay in shape and do that for 15 years. So, I mean, that's a long time. And every time I think about it now and then, when I started playing myself, I realized like, man, this is hard. I only had 4 total my whole college career. So I'm like, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, and then in his 15th year, having so many interceptions alone, where that most of that had to be upstairs, and how he got those interceptions. I mean, you're right. He had to have been like just a genius on the field. And some of my argument to help you out there would be a good portion of his career. So I calculated it out. It was like 4.3 or 4.4 something per year, right?
Right.
But a lot of his career, he only had 14 games in a season. So you got to grade that in a curve. Yeah. So it's like all these factors, again, going back, I don't see any correlation why that number doesn't relate to the eligibility to get that gold bust, or the bronze bust. I'm sorry, the gold jacket, that is. So yeah. I'm with you.
Well, thank you. Like I said, it to me, it's mind boggling. Like I said, I don't care if you're in the top 5 of anywhere you work out of all time, like the history of it. I mean, I think that's deserving. I don't care if you played 20. If you say longevity is the reason, I mean, it still takes a lot to even play that long and then perform at that level. His last 2 years, he led the AFC Conference in interception, and that's at 35 and 36. So, like I said, when I look back at it, that's just mind-boggling how he was able to do that, and probably could have stuck around a couple more years to even move up even further. Because he always, one of the things, he always stayed in shape. I mean, he worked out back then, like around the clock. Was always, like I said, a student of the game, always in shape. So, like I said, I have a lot of respect for him, what he's able to accomplish.
Yeah, and I've only been able to just through articles. I mean, it's not fair for me to even compare my learning to your on the field with him experience, but that's the same sentiment that I get when I look through the articles and when I read other people talking about not just him and his career, but him as the man. It just definitely, I think you had a good one there is what I want to say.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And with that, you were able to have a unique experience that most people don't. And when you went into college, and how did that? How was that dynamic having your father as a coach?
I guess it was a blessing and a curse at first because initially it was definitely something where I had to go in and improve myself because I knew that there were going to be you know, some comments about nepotism and you only got a scholarship because your dad and so when things go wrong too, especially and the other part of it is just like being that even if I wasn't playing the son of a coach, because when you're not losing, you're losing. You hear all these comments, you hear stuff on the radio. There's not an escape from it. So then playing it was a little bit easier because at least I can control some of the stuff when I'm going out on the field. But it was a awesome experience to be able to play for him. My decision to go there was because we played the same position. I didn't think that I can get any better, teaching from the person that had 65 interceptions. So it was a no-brainer for me to play for my father.
Were there any life lessons that you gained that you think you could have only gained on the field from him versus as a father, or was it intermingled?
Um, I don't know. Like I said, it was more. My dad never pushed me into it, and sometimes I think that was like. Uh, I wish he would have, because he never pushed me to go into it. It was something I always wanted to play. He actually didn't allow me to play football until the ninth grade. So all those times I had guys playing Pop Warner football and all these things, I would beg every year to play, and the answer was always no. So um, it was something I always wanted to do. But then as I started playing, he would tell me, "Hey, you need to run track." He would tell me that, "Hey, you need to do this," but he never forced it on me. So that's the part I was like, I wish, because I wanted to play. I wish he would have forced me to run track. I wish he'd have forced me to actually put in more work at the time, because I think that I would have developed even more, and definitely that track was something I wish I would have done. Listen a little bit more.
Yeah,
So
it's one of those things that we always look back and we have the wishes and the 2020 lenses and everything. And I myself, I had some talent when it came to playing sports, but I never took that extra edge where I would in the off season practice and do all
yeah,
the training and so I
yeah.
really wish I would have more.
Yeah. Like I try to tell my boys now, they still don't see it. I'm like, if it was easy, everybody would do it. So you got to put in
Right.
you got to put in the work. Everybody likes to see the end result, but the great ones put in the work, and it's like they do it when nobody's watching.
Yeah, I mean, going back to say great ones and the whole Jerry Rice, I mean, I was understanding that he's one of the hardest workers there was, period, in the game.
Yeah,
And look what
yeah,
happened there.
yeah. And growing up, I didn't realize. I just thought, like I said, it didn't seem like it was hard. Like I said, I remember us riding in the car while he's running. Me just going out and just, I mean, like I said, he was always constantly running, constantly in
hmm
shape. And I didn't think about it like it was work because he didn't make it seem like he just did it. So, and then when I started playing, I'm like, man, this is tough. This is hard. So he definitely was, like I said, he definitely stayed in shape. So that was one of the things that I admired about him.
Speaking of the wide receivers there and Jerry Rice, I have a question from the guy that I said that had the podcast, Joe Zagorski there. I
Uh-huh.
asked him because I told him, I was like, hey, I'm going to have Ken's son on. And I said, why don't you give me a question? And one of them he had was basically, he wanted to know because his podcast is mostly all about the 70s. So
Okay.
he talks about 70s football to day's end. What would like has he ever talked about or did he ever talk to you about wide receivers that he covered all the great ones and which one maybe gave him the most fits or anything like that?
Yeah, and it's funny because as I got older and as we used to talk, then we really could have conversations because I understood what it take. But honestly, the best wide. Okay, he said Paul Warfield. He said he was definitely one of the top wide receivers. He was like every route looked the same. He was just very smooth. John Stallworth, they played him twice a year, stood out. But the number one guy that he said he would always say this, and he would just say this is that the baddest wide receiver he went against was the one he went in practice every day, is Isaac Curtis. It's like Isaac Curtis. He was a track star from I believe San Diego State, but he was like Isaac didn't get enough credit, and he was that guy, So, but I know, like I said, Paul Warfield, John Stallworth, um, and Isaac. Those are the three that really stand out to me that he always kind of mentioned.
What about quarterbacks? Did he ever bring up which ones where he thought were the legendary ones?
We didn't really talk about quarterback so much, but he would always mention the guy I just told you about, the quarterback that was injured. They came out the same year. Who did I just say? The Cincinnati Bengals. He was.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure.
I can't think of his name now, but they came out the same year, and his career was ended because of shoulder injury. And he was like, I'm about to look it up now, but he always said that if they probably would have won several Super Bowls if he would have never got hurt, the Bengals.
He was that good, he thought?
Yeah, he was that good. He was really that good. But we didn't really talk about quarterbacks too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially because, like you said, you went into that same position, and that the craft was against that wide receiver. And what I hear, so I listen to different kinds of podcasts about fantasy football, which doesn't always necessarily directly relate to regular football.
Right.
But do you believe that talent makes more of a difference in, say, the cornerback position versus other positions sometimes, or is it really like? Because in running backs, they say you can plug and play. I'm using that very cautious or loosely, but cornerbacks and receivers, it seems like the talent really makes a lot of a difference.
Yeah, well, what I would say, and my dad always said it. I really think that the defensive back position, those guys are the most athletic because they have to be able to run just as fast backwards as they do forward. They have to be able to change directions. They definitely have to be, fast, just like a wide receiver. They definitely have to have hands like a wide receiver. They have to, change directions like running back. So we always thought that the defensive backs were the best athletes on the field, and a lot of times they were so versatile because a lot of defensive backs always started off at like quarterback. Like Dion was a quarterback in high school. There's a lot of different other athletes that were quarterbacks in high school and then transitioned to that defensive back. So that just shows how athletic a lot of the defensive backs are. They play wide receiver, they play running back, and so I definitely think that the defensive back position, a lot of times those guys are the most athletic out there on the field.
Did you have any other, favorite players growing up other than watching your dad?
Yeah, my favorite player, of course my dad was my favorite, but the guy that I watched that I wanted to go to SMU was because of Eric Dickerson. He was my favorite player, the Pony Express, him and Craig James. They formed the Pony Express. I know you're kind of younger, but those guys, I was all set to go to SMU because of Eric Dickerson.
Yeah, I used to live in the Dallas area, so I drove one time on the SMU campus, and I'm like, "What? I didn't even realize they had a school over here."
Right? Yeah, it's a private school. It's a smaller school, but they were tough back in the day. Then they got into all those the death penalty and all that kind of stuff. They were doing some crazy stuff. I don't know if you ever seen the 30 for 30 on that.
I haven't seen the 30 for 30, but I've heard of what happened. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, they were tough.
Speaking of going back and like the driving around and stuff, I seen the website Ken Riley Golf Tournament.
Yes.
Is that something that you still do nowadays? Or I don't know with this year, but
well, that's interesting that you bring that up because I was just thinking about it. We had been going back and forth. I've been going back and forth with my mom and my sisters, and I think we're going to try to do it this year. He was already planning of doing it for this year, but of course, with COVID-19, he was unable to do so. So I would like to see it continue. It was definitely starting to grow. He always had a lot of his former players come back, and a lot of guys that played in the late '70s and early '80s, and it was definitely growing and growing and getting bigger and bigger each year. So that's something I would like to try to continue.
What's the purpose of the golf tournament there?
He had a Ken Riley Foundation. It goes to kids that um, who maybe that maybe weren't looking at maybe going to a 4-year college, but maybe going into like trades. So he would raise that money for a lot of the underprivileged kids, and so they can it's called the EPAC, and I can't recall what it stands for right now because they had it, but I know one of the things with that golf tournament went towards that EPAC foundation that he started, and he was very to his last days was always involved in the community and giving back, and really even when he was the dean of Winter Haven High School, just wanted to be there and assist kids and make sure that their futures were bright. So he definitely was involved in the community, a leader in the community, and wanted to see kids have the opportunity to grow and become something out of themselves.
Yeah, just going back again, like I started off the interview with, he just everything that I've seen, it seems like he's just a good dude. I guess is a way to sum it up in a couple words. And I hope that everything that we do here can at least push a little bit closer to the pendulum of swing it to the other side, so he does get in. There anything that you would like from the listeners of the show to be able to help or push in the right direction or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's I, like he always said, I like to say the numbers speak for himself, but a lot of times, like I said, I know there are arguments against, it was just longevity. Then the other argument was that he played on the other side of Lamar Parrish. I've heard all the arguments, but like I said, unless you've actually played it, I mean, this is the highest level. This is the NFL. They've been in existence now 100 years, and to be the top five, the number 4 at the time of when you retire, and then on top of that, like I said, to be the number 2 all time for pure corners. To have that many interceptions, I don't care if you. I mean, I don't understand it. I know some that have less interceptions. I know some that say not making impacts. He was consistently doing his job, and you can talk to the players that played with him in that area. They would validate what I'm saying. So a lot of times it comes down to the media, the popularity, and like I said, the Bengals were Cincinnati's a smaller market. They really didn't publicize their players like a lot of other teams do. And like I said, and they haven't won. And I think that hurt. Like I said, I think that hurts. Ken Anderson, he's another one that's deserving. Lamar Parrish deserves to be in there as well. Isaac Curtis, like I said, he never gets mentioned. There's a lot of great players that, like I said, it's unfortunate that if you're in a smaller market or you're not one of the ones that are popular or your team is not pushing for it, you kind of get lost in the shuffle. And then if people that are not students, like I'm glad that you actually, like I said, you learn the history of the sport and you actually do your homework and start hearing about some of these guys. Like, wait a minute, this guy has this amount of numbers, and like he was playing in the 7th. He was in the toughest division with the Steelers because the Steelers are, pretty much winning every other year, but people don't realize that during the time the Steelers are winning, the Bengals owned them. The Bengals had a better record against the Steelers during that time, but they just, so it's unfortunate. Like I say, a lot of times a lot of good players get lost like that when say maybe not one of the popular players. So.
Yeah, it's a challenging one, and I understand too that every year more senior eligible players get put into the pool, so then you're shuffling things around. And again, I'll do everything we can through this network to be able to continue to promote his eligibility, because until I can find somebody that's unless I can find a whole handful or truckload of people I feel are more deserving, then I gotta at least put my flag there. So,
Well, I really appreciate that. And like I said, I just joined Twitter maybe like after his passing because I started seeing some stuff. But and I started doing more. I've emailed all of the senior committee voters, and most like 80% of them say, "Hey, if your dad, gets into that room, we would support him. It's just getting into the room." And so I really pray and hope that he gets in. I think this last time was the closest that he ever got. I heard it was like neck and neck. I mean, that's just what I read between him and Drew Pearson. So I don't know how true that was, but so I heard he's inching closer, and it's just unfortunate. Like I said, when he does get in, because I'm staying positive that he will that he will get in, but he won't be able to see it. So that's the only negative about it.
well, I have a question that I ask every guest, and I would say let's take my DeLorean to the future to the actual ceremony of when it happens, but let's go backwards. I'm going to give you the keys to my DeLorean right now. Go back in any point. Generally, I say any point in NFL history, but because you have a special circumstance, you can go to any game and you can play on the other side of your dad. What game or what team you're going to play against as a teammate of his?
I'm a teammate with him, or
Yeah, like you're on the other cornerback
corner?
spot. Yeah.
Well, great. I guess I would have to, like I said, since they were the dynasty team, it would probably have to be the Steelers, against Bradshaw and Lynn Swan and Stallworth and Franco Harris and all of those guys. So that's probably where I would. Sounds a little intimidating now that I think about it, but yeah, that would
Right.
that would be a fun game to play in.
Wouldn't that be cool though if you were able to actually go back and play, side by side with your dad like that?
That'd be awesome. And I was looking for the pictures that we was talking because I did like a side by side comparison, and like I said, our stance was like almost identical. So I'm like, it was honestly growing up in high school, I didn't like playing defensive back. I'd rather play wide receiver, and that's what I played all throughout high school. And just because my school was so small, at one time we only had 13 players, so we had to go both ways. It wasn't like a choice.
Right, no options.
Yeah, if it was my choice, I would just play wide receiver. And then when I got to college, it was more of like we were like loaded at wide receiver. I think like 3 or 4 of those guys ended up making it to the NFL. That's how deep we were at wide receiver. So it was more like it's too deep over there. It's like, defensive back would be the obvious choice, and it was natural for me. Like I said, I didn't even play until the 9th grade, and I didn't really start playing defensive back until I got to college. I played, like I said, I played in high school, but that wasn't my main position. My main position was wide receiver. So just transition to defensive back was like seamless for me. A lot of it just came natural. It wasn't hard for me. So.
You did get invited to one of the training camps, didn't you?
I did. I actually came to Cincinnati. I was in the NFL Combines in '94, and that's where that track comes in. But I got hurt my senior year, or the last 2 years, and I hurt my hamstring. And if I would have known today, I would have never run at the Combines because I wasn't ready for one. And most times people don't even run the Combines because it's electronic, and you just feel more comfortable at your own facility. So. But yeah, I was up in the 1994 Combine. I actually was in Cincinnati when Kajana Connor was the first pick. So I was up in the mini camp. David Schuler was the coach. Ron Meeks was the secondary coach. So yeah, I was up in Cincinnati for the mini camp.
I remember Kajana Carter. I had like 38 of his rookie cards. It seemed like they came in every pack.
Yeah. And it was unfortunate. He got hurt like one of the first game or something. So it's just crazy. It's just injuries play a big part in it.
You're talking to a guy who, I don't know if you saw my cup here, but I'm a Lions fan. So me growing up, it was Barry Sanders and the Lions. Like I was born in '85. So there's like that's all I had my whole life until he retired. And of course, then I'm in shambles, but like, what's going to happen from there?
Right.
So,
Yeah. All the great ones seem like they retire early from Detroit. Same thing with Megatron. They still like seem like they have
yeah.
some left in the tank. But
Yeah, I would have loved to, even if he had to go to another team, both of them, to get that ring. I would have,
right.
it's like, get the ring. Both of you deserve it, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
Megatron this year, he's eligible. Is it this year or next? I think it's this upcoming year he's
Right.
eligible
I
to be
think so.
voted for. The same year as Peyton and Charles Woodson and those guys. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know if I can understand the argument of he's on the opposite side of your dad. He had less seasons versus
Yeah.
longevity.
Yeah. Yeah. But he definitely changed the game. He definitely was a game changer, though. So I think he does. But like I said, it all depends on voters and how they feel. So.
Right, yeah. And again, we'll go back to we're going to leave this out there. I'll try to get as much traction as we can. Not saying that I'm not like, what do they call it? A deal maker, move maker, shaker, whatever they call that. I don't know what it is.
Any news, I really appreciate it, man. Like I said, when you reached out to him, I'm like, of course, anything I can do. And I honestly really do appreciate when, I get tweets or I hear people talking about my father, because like I said, like I said, I really appreciate that. That really means a lot.
I do actually have another guy that might want to bring you on his show on my network. He has a show called Football This Family. Jeremy McFarland. He's a Nashville, he's Tennessee fan, but he likes to have one part of, like, he'll go through each episode. It's like a quick little brief history of the team, and then he'll have a interview of one person and why that team is their family. Like for you, the Bengals would make sense, even though it's a different kind of dynamic there. So
Right.
he might be interested in something like that. Of course, then we work in the Hall of Fame thing.
Right.
So
yeah,
I'll let you, if you're interested, I can let him
definitely.
know.
Like I said, as long whatever I can do to keep his name out, that is something I definitely going to continue to do.
Has anybody ever approached you to write a book about him by any chance?
No, no, and I don't think anybody approached him about writing his book. I just read Reggie Williams' book. That was his roommate. They were really, really good friends. My father was one of the godfathers to one of his sons, and Reggie just came out with the book called Relentless, and it was a great book. And I admire Reggie a lot too, because my dad always said he was the toughest player that he played with, because Reggie was a linebacker, inside linebacker for Cincinnati. So they played together for at least 9 years or so. So they were very close. And but no, it's definitely a great book. So, but yeah, no, nobody's ever.
Okay, well, one thing I want to say too before we get into the post stuff is, do you have any last words of wisdom for the listeners of the show?
Well, I just say do your homework sometimes and not listen to what others say. And like I said, I know there's always different arguments, and everybody has that guy or that team that they root for. But I'm like, I just can't. 65 top 5 all time. I don't see how you can argue against that. And that's all time that ever played in the National Football League. Like I said, sometimes a lot of times they only played 14 games. He played corner all the way through. No, he didn't switch to safety when he got older. He led the AFC conference the last 2 years. And they weren't throwing the ball 50 to 60 times. Like what's the kid that just threw the ball 60 times? Or the Cincinnati quarterback. He just threw the ball.
Oh, Burrow?
Yeah, Burrow. I like him too. I think he's going to be a great quarterback. But he just threw it 60 times. So they wasn't throwing the ball back then like they were then. And like I said, the argument that he was playing against, he played on the other side of Lamar Parrish doesn't make sense either, because if you're saying that, they didn't throw at Lamar and they threw at my dad, he still had to be in a position to make those plays. Where are all the cornerbacks that played on the opposite side of Deion Sanders? Do they have those numbers? So you can't say, he played on the opposite side and they threw at him. Well, of course, if they threw at him, he still had to be there to make those plays. So that argument doesn't make sense, because, and I think he only played with Lamar for like 9 years. So what happened to the other 6 or 7 years that he played? So in his last 2, he led the conference. So you can't use that argument, because he got better as he got older. I mean, it was more consistent. So it's just those little arguments that frustrate me because it doesn't really make sense if you truly understand the game and really think about what you're saying. So it's like I said, the numbers speak for themselves. Like I said, his peers, like I said, from even the Mel Blancs, the Lynn Stallworths, a lot of his peers said that, he was one of those guys. He was that guy. I mean, he wasn't flashy, didn't do a lot of talking. I think a lot of times that was to his detriment when it comes to situations like this. Even as he retired, you would never know my dad was fifth all time or even played the NFL unless, you ask him. He wasn't boastful. That just wasn't his style. And I mean, it never was. And he felt that his numbers speak for himself. And like I said, even just the man himself, though, never got in any trouble off the field. All the things that he did for his community, he left Cincinnati, went back to his alma mater, Florida A&M, stayed there, was a coach, and then transitioned to an athletic administrator, left Florida A&M, and then went to Haven and became a dean, and then later retired. But I mean, it's like the man himself too. I mean, that's some character that he played with some of the greatest coaches, Paul Brown, Forrest Gregg to this day. God rest his soul too. He passed away this year. Felt that he should have been in the Hall of Fame. He's the only, even though he's not officially, they never officially retired his number, but it's retired because nobody wears number 13. Coach Brown said that nobody would never wear the number 13 again. So if you ever notice, there's nobody wearing that number. So it's like I said, I can go on and on of not only that speaks to him as a player, but as a man, because a lot of great people held him in high regard as well as he held them in high regard. But that just goes to show a lot about who he was as a person and who he was as a man. So I am very honored and proud of him. And like I said, and even if he was, like I said, I keep going back top 5, man. That's crazy. 65. And I have an extra picture with my dad, Paul Krause. It was at Larry Little's golf tournament. So it was Kenny Houston, who was in the Hall of Fame. He was the safety for the Redskins and the Oilers. And then Paul Krause, who's the actual number 1 interceptor with 81. And then it was my dad. So it was over. I have a picture I call, like I said, I forgot what I called it, but they had over 200 interceptions between the three of them. I can see that picture too, though. But it's I'm like 81 interceptions, and look how long it took him to get in. I don't understand that. If you can have 81 interceptions, and they took forever to get him in the Hall of Fame. So it's that voting process is mind-boggling to me. So
there you go. Arguments against longevity, so the numbers may not seem as impressive. He played most of his career across the premier cornerback, but still, he was tied for 5th all-time in interception with 65. Should this be enough to get him in the Hall? What say you? I'd love to hear your feedback and opinions for what you think about Ken Riley's bid for the Hall of Fame. You can do so over at the website, which is sportshistorynetwork.com, the headquarters for your favorite sports history year. But for now, dudes, I'm through if you're through.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Football History Dude. To make sure you're the first to get the next episode, please subscribe on your podcast player of choice and head on over to thefootballhistorydude.com for the show notes and more information on the history of the NFL. And remember, dudes, where we're going, we don't need roads.
We here at the Sports History Network proudly partner with 26 podcasts, all revolving around the history of sports. But did you know that many of our hosts were sports history authors way before they started their shows? It's true. We've got Joe Ziemba, host of When Football Was Football, Joe Zagurski, host of Pro Football in the 1970s, Mark Morthier, host of Yesterday's Sports, Tommy Phillips, host of Lombardi Memories, and Scott Adamson, co-host of From the 55-Yard Line. All these authors have many books for you to choose from. To check them out, go to our website at sportshistorynetwork.com/sportshistorybooks. Pick up your copy today. Soundtrack provided by Kevin MacLeod of filmmusic.io.